Hello, I'm Bella Murphin, the new Director General here at the CLA, and I'm joined today by my colleague Judy Cale, who heads up our policy team, and by Jo Evans, our Vice President. We're focusing today on the budget. We are working flat out to analyse the impact of the Chancellor's decisions on members' businesses and to mitigate those impacts. It's been a really busy few weeks as we prepared for the budget, and we're expecting many more busy weeks to come. And it's been really amazing to see the organisation mobilise from the moment that the Chancellor said her last word, as we analyse what this all means for our members and make sure that we can minimise the impacts and maximise the opportunities for the future. In today's short session, we're going to talk you through that analysis of those announcements, why they matter, and what the next steps are as the dust settles on the budget. Judy Cale, you're going to start by talking us through the main points from the budget for our membership. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Bella. I hope that you can see my slides now. Excellent. So there won't be a lot of slides. I'm going to cover inheritance tax, which is the main change in the budget that will affect our members. I will mention the other changes that are relevant too, and I will finish with the DEFRA budget and the de-linked payments changes that were announced at the same time as the budget. So let's start with inheritance tax. So the Chancellor has announced changes to agricultural property relief, known as APR, and business property relief, known as BPR. And basically the big message is you will no longer be able to pass on property tax-free in all cases under APR and BPR, which has been the case until now. There is a tax-free threshold that is combined between BPR and APR at 1 million per owner for qualifying assets, so farm assets and other business property. Above that 1 million, you will then get a relief on the normal inheritance tax rate of 40%. In other words, you will be paying 20% on those assets. However, it is possible to use what's known as the nil rate band of £325,000. That's something that every one of us gets. And in some cases, if your total estate is under 2.7 million, also a residence nil rate band of £175,000. That's per person. So what I would say is those two nil rate bands, if you are, or if the estate is eligible for them, can cover more of the assets. In other words, your 1 million doesn't kick in quite as early as it normally would without them. But nevertheless, what we're finding is that for many of our members' businesses, 1 million is a ridiculously low threshold. So that's the main issue that we are already starting to raise with the Treasury, with some examples and a lot of modelling. You might have heard the Chancellor talk about, well, actually, it's not 1 million, it's 2 million, and there's the nil rate band, so actually it's 3 million. It's a lot more complicated than that. What she was doing is multiplying the number of allowances that are available if the farm business and the other businesses are owned by a couple rather than by an individual owner. So as ever, tax issues are more complicated than it shows, and that is the point that we have made to the Treasury. I've got it on my slide there. I'm going to say it now. It's really important that you get advice on your tax position, not least because the new regime only starts on the 6th of April 2026, so you've got a bit of time to think about what is possible and what suits your business, because I think there is a risk that people panic, and that's completely normal and understandable, but then make decisions that are not actually in the long-term interest of their business. The final bit that I would mention on inheritance tax is a bit of good news, which is that land that is being used strictly for environmental purposes in government schemes is now going to be firmly in scope of the relief on inheritance tax. Moving on, the other changes include capital gains tax changes to the rates, which I will not read out, but that started from the budget day, so 30th of October. The CLA view on this, which we have already mentioned to the Treasury, is that those rates penalise long-term or long-held assets, which is what most of our members have. So it is going to impact members who have to sell assets disproportionately. Employers' national insurance contribution increases have been well covered in the media. I won't say a lot more, except that if you are a very small employer, which will be the case for many members, you will not have to pay national insurance contributions because the threshold at which those kick in has been increased. So that may be a bit of relief for some members. In terms of better news, no change to the fuel duty, which was something that could have been expected, a continuation of the business rate relief, albeit at a lower level of 40% rather than the 70% that were given in COVID times for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. There was an announcement at the budget that this would be made permanently lower, but we do not have the details of that yet. Another bit of good news, the small business multiplier is or remains frozen. That's for the overall budget. Let me tell you a little bit about the DEFRA budget for next year. So if you are keen followers of government machinations, you will know that the Chancellor announced the spending review for the next financial year and that there will be further announcements for the 3 years after that in spring next year. So what I'm talking about today is just the next financial year and what's going to happen to the DEFRA budget. So overall, the budget is up 2.7%, which is good. We think that it's not actually nearly enough to cover the scale of the need and the scale of the ambition that government set itself, including through legal targets. The agricultural budget is frozen. ELM continues, which is good news. The very bad news, however, is that DEFRA have announced deeper cuts in de-linked payments. That's the remnant of BPS for next year. So most people were planning on a continued flat rate reduction in their payments. And actually, DEFRA have announced a 76% cut. Just to remind people, we're at 50% at the moment. But also, and that probably is going to have the biggest impact, a £7,200 cap on the maximum amount that anybody can expect next year. This we already know is going to make a massive difference to members, and we are trying to persuade DEFRA that this is just going to have a very, very negative impact on investments. So if you want to give us case studies with what it means for you next year in terms of the size of the cut for you, what it means in practice, what you were going to be able to do and are no longer going to be able to do, please do so through the email address at our website or advice@cla.org.uk, or indeed, better still, your regional directors. And that's me, Bella. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judicael. Now I'm going to come to Joe, who has been spending a lot of the last few days talking to members. It would be great to hear from you about what you're hearing from them and what that means in terms of what we're asking government for at this point.
Thank you, Bella. I've been an officer of the CLA for nearly 1 year now. I would say that the last 4 or 5 days of my CLA career have involved more email traffic than ever before. Clearly, the feelings around our membership are feelings are running high, emotions are running high, and completely understand why. In many of the letters that I've written to members, I've explained that I am feeling the consequences of this budget very acutely in my own business. So I'm very much feeling like a member now, more than anything else. I think that there are a couple of things that I wanted to mention, which is what I've been hearing through the membership. One is the fundamental lack of understanding of how rural businesses work. I think that has to be the only conclusion one can draw from some of the decisions that have been made in this budget. And in a way, that gives me a chink of hope, because I feel that one of the CLA's great strengths is to be able to articulate good sense, good reason, good analysis, good modelling. And I think we can quite quickly dismantle some of the assumptions that government have put out thus far. Judy Kell mentioned the valuation point. Of course, every one of our members has a different type of business, and to try and think that one can categorize them either by a value or by an acreage is such a reductive way of looking at rural business. It's far more complicated than that. I think one of the things also that I want members to feel reassured on is that there's been a lot in the media around how many farms will be caught by this. We've put the number out of around 70,000. We stand by that analysis. The government has said, well, I think some huge number of, in their mind, small family farms would be exempted from this. This is the stuff that we're really going to be getting into now. Of course, every year, one would hope that not too many farms would be caught by these sorts of things. Death is unpredictable like that. I saw some statistics that it might be in the hundreds rather than in the thousands. But the really fundamental point with this change is that the 70,000 number represents the bulk of meaningful, viable farm businesses, and now the sword of Damocles is dangling over them. And whether or not it will drop in the near future or in the medium future really makes no difference to how destabilizing these measures will be in terms of running a long-term multi-generational business. So I don't know if that's quite answered your question, Bella, but in terms of getting a sense of feeling, and certainly what I'm reflecting back from our members, I think that covers it. I think you also mentioned what we want to happen next. The points that Judy Kell has put up on her slides, of course, that's the state of play as we see it now. That is not a position that the CLA is lying down on, far from it. We are calling for a complete review, a complete reversal, certainly, of the inheritance tax change proposals. And another point that I've heard from members is the importance to speak with one voice from the rural community. So my fellow officers and I know all of us on this call, we joined a call with our colleagues from the NFU only yesterday. We are all singing from the same hymn sheet as to how catastrophic this will be for rural businesses, and that will continue as we start to lobby government. I think there are a couple of direct things. On behalf of members, one of the great strengths right now of the convening force of the CLA is that we are talking to Treasury, we are talking to DEFRA, we are making the representations, and we're explaining how the detail of this budget for rural businesses is anti-growth, it's anti-domestic food production, it is completely backwards in terms of furthering the agenda of environmental recovery, because by its very nature, environmental recovery is long term, and this destabilizes that entire agenda. So we're doing an awful lot on behalf of all members. And to emphasize Judy Kell's point around case studies, really keen to hear what the direct impacts in specific detail will be on our members. And then I think there's the part around what individual members can do. I've read a lot in the media, on social media, and on my own groups that I'm involved in around the prospect of direct action. It's not for me to tell any member what they should or shouldn't do. And personally, I feel that now is not the time to be taking direct action in Westminster. And the principal reason for that is because I feel that they've got the facts wrong. And we will enable the facts to land best if we have dialogue, if we have constructive and meaningful and, dare I say, positive, but certainly credible dialogue with those that hold the levers of power. And I think descending on them in some sort of march won't improve our ability to have strong dialogue around the table. So I'm certainly personally pursuing that option first and foremost. But I do think members should be writing to their local MPs with representations. We've got our own campaigns. Add your names to that for sure. Like I say, add case studies to the picture. And you know, I still feel confident that we'll be able to distill some of the truths through what they're trying to get done. Sorry, that's an awful sentence, but you get my gist. I think what we're trying to understand is how can the rural economy play its part in delivering credible tax revenue for the government? This is not the way to do it, and we will be making that point very credibly.
Thank you, Joe. I mean, you've given a really clear overview of the strength of feeling, but also of the practical things that our members can do to help and support us as we put those messages and those facts to government. And they can do that. You can do that through your regional directors. And we'd encourage people to bring to life what this means for these individual constituencies around the country, demonstrate how this is going to impact different businesses, to help us understand that and help us to bring that to life for the officials who are advising government at the moment. It is really unfortunate that this wasn't a budget for the rural economy, despite how vital rural businesses are for the health and prosperity of the country. And as we campaign now on what we've seen so far and look ahead to the 3-year spending review that's now underway, there is so much to play for, and the CLA has such an important role to play in getting that pro-rural growth message permeating, so that when the Chancellor makes her spring budget, we see a much more pro-rural growth message coming through to ensure that we're unlocking that potential of rural businesses around the country and reversing the damaging message that this budget has sent to so many rural businesses. I think, therefore, I'm going to draw this to a close. But before I do, I just want to remind people that the CLA's website is a really rich seam of information, and we have just updated the succession planning section of the website with the latest information, and we'll continue to keep that up to date as everything unfolds over the coming weeks. And we're also going to be running a webinar, a more techie webinar at the end of this month, where you'll be able to hear from our tax experts and other experts from within the CLA team about next steps on all of this. And lastly, it would be a missed opportunity not to say that we are hearing so much strength of feeling from people right across the country, many of whom who are not in membership of the CLA at the moment. And this is really a call to arms, because this is a moment where the CLA can really work for you and your rural businesses around the country to get your messages heard by government, to get the decision makers to understand the implications of what's happening at the moment and why adjusting and changing and going back on some of what's happened so far would be a wise move for the economy and for the prosperity of our country. So please do take a look at the website and you can find out more about joining the organisation. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Judicael, and thank you to everyone for listening. And please do have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.